In chapter 1 is where we're going to talk about starting your career goals. And this week we'll be setting those career goals. So I just wanted to remind you to read chapter 2 as well as chapter 1 because it will help you in setting your career goals. Um, Good evening, Kenneth. I went ahead and started talking because I'm recording. Didn't want you to think I was talking to myself. All right. So just as a recap, if you have any questions, hopefully everybody knows how to do their online pledge. I saw all of you did your attendance, so that's great. So I don't think you guys have any issues with that. Do you have any other questions before we get started with chapter 1 tonight? And I won't be too long because I want you guys to, in addition to reading chapter 1, I also want you to read chapter 2 because it's going to be very important that you understand how to set those career goals, specifically the long-term goal that you'll be using for your project. So I really want to give you some time to read chapter 1 and 2, especially if you haven't started reading chapter 1 yet, so you can understand what I mean by career goal. But when you think about your career goal, as it relates to your financial goal, many of us have these financial goals, so we know what it feels like and what it looks like to save, right? Whether we're saving for rainy days, saving to buy a house, saving, for a future, maybe even saving to start our own business. But when it comes to our career plan, sometimes we don't always think about those tangentially, meaning that oftentimes, whatever your vision is for your financial plan, it works in tandem with your career plan. So it's almost as critical to set a career plan as it is to set a financial plan, because in essence, your career is feeding your financial plan. Does that make sense? And we know that everybody's career plan is going to vary from person to person. Nobody's going to have the same career plan. Just because you guys are in the same field, it doesn't mean that you're going in the same direction. What we want you to understand is that there is a big difference between your job and your career. Unlike a job, you can find a job, you'll start that job. Yeah, those jobs are interested in your experience levels. But for the most part, they're not going to sit down with you and set some type of long-term career strategy. Back in the day, they used to do that. I remember when I first left the military, even when I was in the military back in the early, 1990. Oh my God, it sounds horrible when I say it like that. The early 2000s, even. Setting career goals for your workers was very common. When I got my first job, I think it was in 1999 or whatever it was, at a pharmaceutical company, the very first thing they sat down with me on is setting my long-term career goals, because back in those days, you had pension plans, you stayed at jobs for 20, 30 years. And so they wanted to make sure that they gave you a mentor and they understood what you wanted to do within the company, right? And when I think back on it, I'm like, wow, like we really had it good back in those days. Nowadays, most people don't stay at a job for 5 years at most. And even if you do stay at that job, very few jobs are sitting down with you, assigning you mentors and helping you to lay out your career plan. Most of them have done away with paying for education. You still may find a few, but for the most part, you're on your own, right? So you have to really take the bull by the horns and say, what is my career going to look like? This is no longer a job. In essence, you have to create your career path. That's why it's going to be so important that you do a lot of research on the electrical industry and really figure out, what type of career paths are there out there for this type of industry. There's a lot of different career paths, right? High voltage, low voltage. You can go into construction, you can go into project management, you can go into government contracting. You can do residential service. There's so much. You can specialize in refrigeration or whatever else, right? So you need to start to narrow down or even start to think about, okay, what lane am I going to take? There's a lot of different websites that you can use. There's a few here that are mentioned, like the Department of Labor, the Occupational Information Network, and I'll just say Google, right? You can just do like AI. If you don't know exactly what type of route you want to take in electrical, I would encourage you just to go to AI, Chat GPT, anything, and say, map me out a career, a 10-year career plan as a new electrical technician, and just see what it has to say. Now, if you already know what you want to be, you want to be a master electrician and own your own business one day, that's even better. But you really have to start to think about what is your career goal, because from that, you'll have to set some type of plan. We'll do an outline of a plan in this class, but as you move through your career, you're going to be in charge of that. It's kind of like how business people set business plans. You have to set your own career plan. And what we're going to do in this class is just give you different tools to help you do that. Essentially, your plan will have what we call action steps. These are the steps that you're going to take to ensure that you actually do become successful in whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. If you're trying to become a master electrician within 6 years and own your own business within 10 years, for example, then you need to set those steps out. Some people say, well, I don't even know exactly if I want to own my own business, if I want to be in charge. How do I even know that's for me? A lot of companies have you take what they call self-assessments. Not sure if you guys have heard of like Myers-Briggs test or anything like that, but we're going to have you do that tonight. You could do it tonight, or, make sure you do it by Sunday. It's like a self-assessment test. And what it does is it helps you to think through, you know, what type of lane works best for you. Yes, you're in the electrical industry, but you still need to figure out what's a good lane for you. Sometimes that starts with knowing yourself, like understanding what am I good at, your aptitudes. Do I have the ability to do something? Do I have the personality for it, right? And is it going to be in alignment with my value system? So when you talk about your aptitude, that's your natural ability. I have a natural ability for numbers for some reason, and I love to read. I've always been that way. Even my teachers identified that in me when I was in kindergarten. I remember my kindergarten teacher just raving to the other teachers about my ability to read. She thought that was crazy. She thought, I guess because of my age or whatever it was. And I remember her parading me around and taking me to the big people's class because she's an advanced reader. She was way more excited about it than I was. Who would have known that years later I would get a job doing that? And the same thing with numbers. I just like to see how things work numerically. And so it was no big surprise that I ended up going into finance and research and education because I just had an aptitude for it. I didn't even think that it was something special, but luckily for me, somebody else identified that and I just kept with it. The only thing I knew is that when I went into the library, I thought that was the best thing ever. Like when I went to the public library, you could not tell me I wasn't in heaven. I thought that was the best thing ever. And I wanted to stay there forever because I just couldn't believe people were giving away that free information. Now look at us, we have to pay for it. When it comes to your abilities, right, this is just making sure you have the capacity to do something, that you have the ability to master something. Like, you can't have a eye condition like myself and try to do something surgical that may not make sense. Well, you want to make sure you have the ability to do a job. But personality is also important, right? So you want to ensure that you have the temperament for that type of work. And that's one of the reasons why we have you take these personality tests, not because it's the end all to be all. Did I say that right? But at any rate, we know it's not, the final say. It is a means to an end, if you will. It just gives you some type of idea of what type of field would work best for you, whether it's, oh, you do really good in a science lab, like the test told me. I kind of knew that already. Or if it says you would really work well with people, maybe that's something maybe it's something that you don't know. Why is that important? Because if you're talking about, for example, owning your own business and going into residential services, you may want to have a good rapport with people. That would be important. I know that's not something I could do. Like, I could not go into people's homes every day and deal with different people, and I know there's good and bad, and they're going to have all kinds of concerns and all that kind of stuff. That would drive me nuts. Conversely, I know I couldn't work in a hospital. My brother been in a hospital for 20, 30 years, however long he's been there. I could never work in a hospital. I thought I was going to be a doctor when I was in my 20s, and I volunteered at the hospital. That lasted for like 3 weeks. I couldn't take the smell. I couldn't take all the sickness, and it was just too much for me. I just couldn't do it. So I had to back away. Luckily, I was smart enough to volunteer, because I actually was in school for pre-med, and that would have been a disaster. And then lastly, knowing what your value system is also important, right? Because you want to make sure that you're not compromising yourself when you are doing something. So that's one of the reasons why we want you to take those tests. They are in alignment with what we call soft skills. When we look at job descriptions on Thursday, because we'll be talking about the technical side of writing your resume, and it is in alignment with making sure you understand how to read job descriptions to pull out skills, both soft skills and hard skills. Well, those soft skills are going to come directly from who you are as a person. A lot of those soft skills are transferable. And when we talk about soft skills, what are we talking about? If you look to the left-hand side here, we're talking about things like being an effective communicator, being trustworthy, having patience. Those are all soft skills. But what may surprise you, if you've never really, really paid attention to most job descriptions, is that when you look at a job description, you'll notice how it always talks about those technical skills at first. And then below those technical skills, they talk about those soft skills. If you guys have ever paid attention to that, I'm not sure. As you move through management, you'll start to see more soft skills than you do hard skills. When you're working in a technical industry, especially when you're like entry level, they'll bombard you with a lot of technical skills. We want you to know how to do this, this, and that, but they always have some type of soft skill at the bottom. And believe it or not, you want to pay attention to those skills, because it gives you an indication of the type of environment you're working in. If you go to work on some type of project teams, and you guys are doing contract work, you're probably going to see a lot of time management. You're going to see a lot of ability to be flexible and problem solve. And they mean what they say, right? Don't think that those people are just putting those words there for no reason. It should give you an indication of what the corporate culture is of that company. So you want to pay attention to that, right? If they saying that they need you to be a good team player and have great time management, is probably because you guys are going to be working on projects, and you know how projects go. You have a certain window that you have to get things done. Most times you may be working on more than one project at a time. Could be, who knows, right? So those soft skills are going to be equally as important as those hard skills. They'll even have you, talk about your technical skills. What are those? Of course, nowadays everybody wants you to know how to use a computer, but in your industry, you will have like handheld, systems that you guys use. Y'all know what those things are. And a lot of those are technology based, right? And depending upon what field you go into, like if you go into refrigeration, you're going to be using a lot of technology. Yes, most companies expect you to know how to use technology, the basics of it, right? Now, moving to your long-term goals. So tonight you will have 2 assignments outside of your participation. One, take that self-assessment. I'll show you what it looks like here shortly, just to get your mind thinking about, okay, what are my skill sets? And, let me really think about, what type of lane I want to be in. And then from there, I want you to try to set at least one long-term goal. We say that when you set this long-term goal, and it's going to be part of that project I told you guys about yesterday, you want to make sure the goal is SMART. What do I mean by that? It needs to be a goal that you can measure. We call it a SMART goal. SMART is an acronym. And if you see here, it stands for being specific, being measurable, being attainable, being realistic and timely. And so if I said, for example, my long-term goal is to become a master electrician by 2031 and own my own business by 2034. Why did I do that? Well, I want to make sure that it's very specific. That was very specific, right? It was measurable because I put a time limit on it. I think it's attainable. I didn't say I'm going to become a master electrician tomorrow. We all know that you have to be in the field for at least a couple of years, right? I'm sure you guys agree, before I even go sit for the license. I think it's pretty reasonable, giving myself 5 years to do it. And it's time bound because I've given it a very specific date. I actually did 2 long-term goals in there. I did become a master electrician, and I also did to own my own business. So we want you to try to set your own long-term goal, but you want to make sure that it's SMART. Does that make sense, guys? You want to make sure that it's SMART. So that's why I want to give you some time to do a little bit of research. Go to Google, look up your industry, read chapters 1 and 2, take your time with it. Even though it's tonight's assignment, I know you need to really think about what that looks like, because as you create this career path, you don't want to rush it, right? You want to really be strategic about what lane you're going to go down, because once you go down that lane, it can be very expensive and it's very, time consuming. You don't want to don't be like me. I thought I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to go into IT. I should have stayed in computer science. When I left pre-med, I went into computer science, but it was so boring because back in those days we were like taking desktop computers apart, and I was like, oh, I can't do this. And then I went into, getting my MBA and getting, becoming a lawyer. But because I was just getting out of the military, they were like, well, ma'am, if you go get your master's and your JD, you have to like quit your job. And I couldn't quit my job. So I just ended up doing the MBA. I should have went ahead and did both of. All right. So sorry about that, guys. I have something going on back here. So that's really why I want you guys to take the time to read chapters 1 and 2, and then to try to set this goal. Chapter 1 talks about the whole career ladder process. It talks about the difference between a career ladder and a career lattice. It's just a different lanes you go down, because eventually you'll have to set your career, right? Make sense? All right, guys, so let me just show you what you're going to be doing. Here's what that personality test will look like when you go to that assignment. You'll see it here. Just click on that link. After you take it's a questionnaire. It's a bunch of questions, but it's just, most of it is just, fill in the bubble. Then once you finish it, you're going to come back and you're going to answer these 2 questions. What were your results, and if you felt that they were accurate. And then the next thing you're going to do is set that long-term goal. Don't be in a rush to set it tonight. Make sure you do your research. If you need help on that, if you want to run it past me, please feel free. If you want to run it past some of your technical instructors, and get some feedback, that's totally fine. All right. So here's your question for tonight. Like I said, I want to give you guys some time to do that research. All I want to know is, and you should know this from your classes, like, what are 3 of those technical skills that your technical instructors have told you about? 3 of those technical skills. And then I want you to think about, because we're all unique, what are 3 of your personal soft skills that you have? And that's going to be unique to you. So give me 3 technical skills that you think are most important, or that your instructor have said is most important, and then 3 soft skills. All right? Once you do that, I'm going to let you guys go so that you can get your studying on. All right, my friends. If you don't have any questions, I'm going to let you go. I'm going to stay back for a little bit, just in case one of the other students pop on, or if anybody has any questions. If not, I will talk to you guys later.